Welcome to the Whiskey Chasers, where we talk about our passion for whiskey and its history, either amongst ourselves or while interviewing distilleries, all while enjoying a glass. I'm Steve.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Chris.
Please enjoy responsibly while enjoying this week's episode of the Whiskey Chasers.
All right, welcome to Whiskey Chasers. We are at Wigle Whiskey.
Is it Wiggle?
It is Wiggle.
All right.
I was right. I win. They were like, it's Wigle. I was like, I don't think it's Wiggle.
It's a fair question because we've gotten flack in the past. So I think historically it would have been pronounced Weigel because it's a German name.
You were right. Herm was the most right.
However, the original owners would joke that Pittsburghers are going to just mispronounce it. And so let's just make it easy on them. Just call it Wiggle. And Wiggle Whiskey just flows off the tongue a little bit better.
Yeah.
So it's Wiggle Whiskey.
We're on the distillation floor recording, which is awesome.
Actually,
We're in the distillation.
Yes.
We're looking at the still.
There's only been one other interview that we've done this for, and it's still 6:30 out of St. Louis. There are no small Arby's and old Arby's, so you can't not walk in their distillation floor because it's their main floor. So, yeah.
And we are with the master distiller. Is that accurate? Is that your title?
Head distiller, production manager. But yeah, I do all of the blending and run our barrel program and manage the operations of our distillery.
Excellent. And Alex Trask. Alex, great to have you on. And you gave us a great tour of the place. And you asked us if we had any other questions. And then we said, not yet.
Oh, wait, yeah.
We do, but
set up the mics first.
Yeah.
And first thing I want to do is just kind of go through what Wigle is and how you guys got started. And then we'll talk more about some of your process and your products and what all we have going on. So I see a bunch of colonial artwork talking about the Whiskey Rebellion and all of that, and Alexander Hamilton being a tax collecting bad guy.
You mean guy.
So
right.
our namesake, Philip Wiggle or Philip Weigel, was an integral part of the Whiskey Rebellion that happened in this part of the state. So, there were tons of stills. So reeling after the Revolutionary War, America was in a ton of debt. And so they decided to start taxing based on the size of your still, I believe, and as opposed to what you were actually producing. And distillation was so prominent that the western part of the state felt that they were particularly affected by that, because of how ingrained it was in the culture. So they were not too pleased to pay those taxes, and hence a rebellion of sorts. And Philip was, there was a number of conflicts that occurred, but essentially he was sentenced to be hanged in Philadelphia. So he was going to be marched across the state, and then he was eventually pardoned. So he didn't die then, at least. But that's just a very TLDR version of the story. But it is cool because this area has so much rich history regarding distillation, and you'll see that emulated through us. And then, we talked a little bit earlier about Liberty Pole and those guys and their namesake as well, and how important that stuff is to our history and our identity here.
Fantastic. And you guys have a wide array of products. And so you guys have a lot of whiskeys, a lot of flavored whiskeys, regular whiskeys, gins, all kinds of stuff. So where you have a particular affinity for whiskey, but everyone has to have their gins and their vodkas and all that such. So why all the experimentation with the flavors and everything?
So we started with rye and we sold the new make, when we first started. So we were just selling White Dog, and then we, progressed on there with gin, and our gin, as I mentioned you guys on the tour, uses the same base as our rye whiskey. So same identity. And so we started with really humble offerings. And then, I think we were looking for other ways to distinguish ourselves. And so innovation became a huge, huge part of that. So we sort of have a reputation for not being afraid to experiment. We've had a number of products that, are no longer available. Some of them have maintained it. It's been super interesting. If you look, I still get inquiries about bottles that people had 6 years ago. And I'm like, I've only been with the company 3 years. I've never heard of that. And I'll ask, someone else who works there. They're like, oh yeah, that was a weird one. And we're never going to make that again because it was too difficult or just something like that. All of those anecdotal things, but it's still a core part of our identity and who we are. And so that's something that I'm really happy to sort of continue to push within our process. But yeah, so not afraid to experiment, trying to balance that with also maintaining like an identity for a serious whiskey company. Like I want, when you experience our whiskeys, for them to be comparable to other great whiskeys that you've had. So it's not just for fun, there is an intent behind it.
Yeah, when we've done a flavored whiskey series before, just to kind of talk a little bit about what that is, and it's flavored whiskey kind of has a bad rap in that way. But when we did that series, we did a few of them that were like craft distilleries that did them, and then we also did like Old Smoky and all that kind of standard stuff. And there was a definite difference in like quality, but also just like depth, full proof, things like that made it so that, yeah, they're doing a lot of flavor, but that doesn't mean that they're also don't have good whiskey behind it, so.
You guys started with rye, and we're in Pennsylvania. Do you guys use Monongahela rye?
So it's interesting that question in recent PA Distillers Guild talks, we've actually been really working hard to come together as a group and define what that is. I think that, people have a general idea, but there isn't any there's not a consensus, right? It's like, is it specific to the type of rye that you're using, the type of still that you're using, where that rye was grown, et cetera, et cetera. And so right now we just had a meeting last week. Next one's in December, but we're trying to just codify, hey, this is what that is, so that when you say that, you will know what that means as far as like how that whiskey was produced. So when we started, it's not that we didn't regard the Monongahela region and the significance in regards to rye production, but the whiskey and our mash bill wasn't meant to emulate any sort of recipe or anything like that we had found. And so it's something that, historians would have a much different take, and they say, hey, this is the only accurate way you can do it. But it's hard because we're trying to get a group of dozens of people to agree, because we don't want it to just exclude people unnecessarily either, because we're all really trying to do the same thing, and that's make great whiskey. And so how can we all do that while also providing transparency to the consumer? So when you come visit our state, hey, this is what it is. And so, you might hear that word thrown about, and I'm not saying that, people that say it are doing anything malicious, but it just hasn't been defined.
There is no definition for it yet. Yeah.
That's what's interesting with talking about craft distilleries, especially, is that, something that's been around for so long and still reaches back very much to its history and its roots, but it's still evolving. And you see that so much more with the craft distilleries. Like you said, we're you're trying to define something that's been slowly becoming something, and you're still not there yet.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because, history the same way, like more information comes to light, and that might change sort of like what your perspective or definition of something is. And so like, the types of still, like the design of that still, going as far as that is something that could be debated regarding like, is that pot still even indicative of what they would be using, at that time? So yeah, lots of variables and more information is always coming.
Interesting. I asked because I like the rye. Rye is like one of my go-to things, and we've started branching into distilleries that use that type of rye, and trying to figure out, okay, is there a flavor difference? Like, and what does that impart, and what does that change? And
I think if you would look to like probably what, based on my conversations I've had with other distillers, it's a full-bodied, aggressive, lots of oils, like this viscous mouthfeel, just bitey rye. That would be indicative of that.
That's exactly what we've said.
right.
Not something that's like ashamed of itself or anything like
bold.
that.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, we always say offensive, like air quotes, offensive.
Yeah,
but in the good way.
In a good way. Yeah.
And so it's like, I think our rye, is more approachable than maybe what I've just described, which is good. You do need people, because rye still obviously has a long ways to go in regard to popularity relative to bourbon. And so that's an ongoing sort of balance that we're trying to achieve, where you can't deny bourbon's success and its presence, but we really want to highlight rye whiskey. That's my favorite style of whiskey, and that's what we're champions of for sure.
We're talking to the right guy.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We are definitely biased towards rye.
Right.
We love bourbon, but we love rye, high rye bourbons too. And your rye might even be a little bit more, like you said, maybe not as air quotes aggressive, but you guys age it a little bit more than some of these craft distilleries are doing.
Yeah, we're really fortunate to have the inventory available to age it at least 4 years. And like I said, we're approaching a time. I just released a 6-year blend. This next single barrel that I picked is 6 years old. Next year, I think we'll have a 9-year single barrel released it in the Q4 of 2026. So we're very fortunate to have that inventory of higher aged rye. Not that age statement's the end all be all, but it is nice to have more colors to paint with when I'm making my blends and those types of decisions for sure.
When we were going through the tour, you mentioned that you're fermenting pots here. You have 4 of them, right? 4 or 5?
4, yeah.
4 of them. But it kind of is a bottleneck. You're making a lot of stuff to ferment, but you can't get it to the still right away just because of your size. Why do you have so many fermenting tanks? Like, why'd they build up that section so much?
I think when I came on, it was sort of this balance where there was a schedule that we could maintain, with having all of them filled and the still schedule. And so it was sustainable. And I don't want to say it wasn't intentional, but it lacked in that area a little bit. And so now we're taking a much more intentional approach about projections and how much whiskey do I need to make this year so that in 4 years or 6 years, I have enough. And like I said, not that wasn't regarded, but maybe it just wasn't focused as much before, but it's because those are part of it, is just, those are a lot cheaper, right? Like one of those could cost us $40,000 to $60,000, which isn't not a lot of money, but right, relative to a still, it is. And so if you can just adjust your schedule accordingly, and in regards to when you start those ferments, you can achieve that balance. But is that the way I would have approached it if I were designing this? No, but there are also trade-offs you have when you're scaling a business, as opposed to just starting saying, hey, this is what we want to do from the start. So you have to just add on, right? Slowly but surely. And there are some things that you can address and some things that just, maybe there's a barrier to due to the cost or other things like that.
Now you've got something in front of us.
Yeah.
Now,
What do we
I didn't even introduce it. So this is part of our brewer series. So we're trying to collaborate with a local brewery every year and take one of their beers that was aged in a barrel and then age one of our whiskeys in it. So this year we partnered with East End Brewery here in Pittsburgh, and they had barley wine barrels that they aged their Gratitude barley wine, which is like a really sought after annual release of theirs. We took our rye whiskey, aged it in there for about 6 months, and then we're going to release it here in a couple weeks. So it's our rye whiskey, barley wine barrels, and I'm really excited about it. It's a project that, as I've been tasting it, as we've been coming along, I'm like, man, I can't wait to get it into bottles. So
yeah, especially for this time of year, because I'm getting a whole lot of like honey off of this. But it's sweet without being overly sweet, but that rye adds all the depth and everything you need. It's a great like wintertime kind of drink.
So finishings is, we briefly talked about finishings earlier. My first experience here was, I'm a big Scotch guy. I'm a big rye guy. You guys do the kilted?
Yeah, kilted cast rye whiskey, yeah.
Which, when I tried it in the bottle that I got, it was Lafroig barrels that you guys were finishing it in.
Which is like our favorite.
Like our favorite Scotch. So it was like, what the heck? No one else is doing this. I've never heard of this before. But then that led into a conversation with the gal that was kind of helping with the tasting. And she said, yeah, our barrel finish program is very unique, and we never know what's going to come up. Like, they've got ideas back there, point back here in the distillation room. Like, they've got ideas back there that we never know what's happening, but it's always something unique, interesting, and fantastic. What? Why? Like, where's this coming from? That's not normal, I feel like.
So I think that's just as far as like areas that you can express yourself and find new things. There are so many variables when you make whiskey: where you get the grain, the proportion of grain, how you distill it, how long you age it, all of that. And those are great. And we continue to try to push that. But then I think, to me, you get flavors that maybe you weren't anticipating with these barrel finishes, or flavors that you couldn't achieve otherwise. And I think I want to continue to challenge myself as a blender and challenge us as a company to push that envelope. And so sometimes you have to kind of reach to get to that, because there isn't something on the market that you can compare it to. Like, it's not a safe bet necessarily, for sure. And I have gotten, in a little bit of trouble for some of the stuff I've put into barrels. But that's because I really have a clear vision in my head of like, I understand our rye whiskey. I've interacted with it a ton, and our bourbon as well. So I can kind of visualize, if I pair it with this and I'm familiar with this, even if I'm not familiar and I understand the flavors, what that might turn out to be. And it is a gamble. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have a crystal ball, but we've been very successful with that lately. Fortunately, we had a rye whiskey that went into sherry barrels that then we put in mezcal barrels. That was really, really popular.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. But that was just, hey, I think these flavors are going to play really nicely. The mezcal is going to apply the smoke and that earthiness. And I love mezcal so much. And I think mezcal and rye have a lot of similarities in those profiles. The sherry is going to add that sweetness, the fruitiness to kind of cut that and balance that out. And if we can accomplish it, through the right aging time and things like that, I think it'll be successful. And it was. So like, I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't lucky, but it was also very intentional.
You just never know when you're trying to make those pairs. Some things that because we even try to, we do a lot of pipe smoking. So we try to pair pipe smoke with, what we're drinking, or it's not always as easy as it sounds, because we've definitely not gotten it right a few times, but sometimes you get it just right. And you're like, okay, this does work, but like you said, it's a gamble sometimes. For you, it's a bigger gamble, obviously. But I just love the idea of, not just having something on its own, but let's do something else to this. Let's try to push the boundary a little bit. And it sounds like you guys are doing a great job of that.
Yeah. And this particular bottle this particular glass, you said this is coming out later on this year. The barley in it, or what from the original barrel, I think comes through at the front end like a lot, and it's really good. And then countered with the rye spice, it works out really nicely.
And into a nice finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, to your point about just gambling and being okay with it not turning out the way you want it to be. So a great example just happened where we had this heavy malt whiskey that I inherited. I haven't made that mash, but it had like crystal malt, chocolate malt, black malt, and it's just like this very heavy whiskey, which is kind of a beast to work with because it's just so strong in those flavors. And so we do have an outlet for that called our Northern Exposure, and we finish that in maple syrup barrels, and that maple sweetness cuts that. But I have a ton of those barrels, and so I was like, man, I kind of want to do something else. So I took orange liqueur barrels from France, finished it in that, wanted to contribute some orange flavor. I got the orange flavor, but it still was just like a really formidable whiskey. And so then, we're not going to say that's a failure. So then I bought cherry liqueur barrels, and then I put it into there, and that's where it's sitting now. And so we're just going to see how that develops. And that's the cool thing about it, is that like there are certain cases where it goes too far in a direction and you can't come back. You still have to find an outlet. We're not in the business of dumping whiskey down the drain. But I think just being okay with, hey, this didn't go exactly as I planned. So what can we do to get it back on track? And so not being discouraged by that and just saying, hey, this is an opportunity to try something else now,
It's how you learn and innovate. Yeah. Figure it out for something else later down the road.
I have a peek behind the curtain kind of question for you. How do you come across getting those barrels? Like, do you have to know a person in France and be like, hey, I heard you have an orange liqueur. Can I have one of your barrels? Or is there like a Facebook or like a marketplace kind of deal? Yeah. Or like a broker?
Yeah. So fortunately, I have good relationships with several brokers. And so usually how it works, especially from Europe, they're going to place an order for a container, right? And so they're coordinating the logistics of like different regions in France that they're getting this from. And then they'll send that out. I'm on their mailing list and like, hey, these are what we're importing. You can speak for those barrels if you want. And so you put your name on that list. And so it's tough because like, what if I'm not in a position that like, I really want that barrel, but like, I already have too much stuff sitting in it. I'm like, man, I hope you can get access to that next year. Or, sometimes it'll be a super local thing like this with this barley wine where I just reached out to a ton of different breweries and said, hey guys, I'll give you these barrels for free because I've aged them, and for bourbon and rye, you can only use them the one time. So they're yours, but I just want them back. And then we'll get them back and we'll age our stuff in them. So they get free barrels, which is great. And then I get free flavor out
Kind
of
of
it.
a win-win.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends. It's sometimes it's by chance, by luck. And, you go to these trade shows, like we're members of the American Craft Spirits Association, as well as the American Distilling Institute. So we go to these conferences. So we'll network with other distilleries, other businesses, and just continue to see what's out there. And that's how you come across some of the cooler opportunities.
It's really fun to hear all this because we mentioned before we started recording that we also have a club. Like the podcast came out of the club. And each year for the club, we have a different theme for the year. So we have an idea of what to get bottle-wise. We have a different bottle each month. Well, last year's theme was all finished bottles. And it's so fascinating to hear how you decide, like, what do I go after? Like, what am I filling in missing gaps? Am I adding? What does that look like? How do I find the unique stuff that fits, right? The bottles that we had last year were really good. I can't say that they were this good. Like it's the
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate
the idea of jumping out there and just experimenting with something different where it may fail, it may succeed. I think that adds to why I'm like, this is some of the best finished, one of the better finished bottles that I've had in a long time because it's not normal. There was a huge possible failure, but it's actually really good.
Yeah. And speaking of the guys at Liberty Pole, I mean, I don't want to give away too much, but like they've also experimented with this type of finish and they've expressed to me because I was curious, like that's the advantage of having peers is sometimes people have done the experimenting for you. And so I was like, hey guys, and they're like, man, we loved it. Then we hated it. Then we loved it again. Then we hate it. And it's, sort of this relationship that they have with those barrels. And so I'm like, man, hopefully I can capture it at a time where we love it and, get that into bottles. But, like we already expressed it, it is a chance that it won't go that way for sure.
And you're the production manager, which means it sounds like you're making a lot of these decisions. Does Wigle give you a lot of grace in terms of saying, go out and do what you are wanting to do?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I don't get to act, autonomously or, and we do have, certain things to contend with. Like we do want it to sell. So like, even if I might think it's the coolest thing in the world, if there's no chance that it sells, that's a harder argument. But I think also there's a trust there. And so like the more successful iterations of this that I can produce, the more trust I get and grace that I would receive to continue to try to experiment. And sometimes you have to use data. Like I think it's very important. And so you're looking like, hey, is this trendy? Is this popular? And I'm not interested in chasing that. I want to be aware of it. I want to say like, hey, this type of barrel finish like was tried and it was really poorly received. So like, let's not do it. And a great example would be like Amberana. Like that was really, really trendy. And then it kind of just carried sort of this like ominous presence within craft whiskey drinkers. And they're like, yeah, that's just not done super tastefully, or there's too much of it. And because it is a formidable wood to work with.
Overpowering.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that didn't mean that I was going to just not try it. But I was going to have a reverence for that and just know. And then I had to get the right project. So sometimes like that, the way that I was able to use that was a collaboration with like a local clothing shop. And we do an annual release with them. They're called Shop 412. Awesome guys. But we knew the collaboration was happening, but they gave me full creative freedom. So then I was like, cool, I'm going to do what I want. And this year, so it's been, we've done it for 3 years. The 2 years that I've been in charge of the product, it's been a honey cask finish rye. So we'll use local honey, get that honey cask. And then I thought it was really cool because you can do different variables. I can use a different type of honey every year if I wanted to do that. But there's also like, I could add different wood chips to that if I wanted to add staves and finish that. So this year, to build on last year's success, I used amberana wood because I thought that would play nicely, and it was not in there for a long time because I had that reverence. Like, it wasn't like I was just like, this is cool, let's see what happens. Like, I was meticulously tasting it and saying, like, is this going to overpower it? Because I knew that it could, and I knew that the whiskey consumer was very sensitive to that. When they saw that word, they were already like bracing themselves because they're like, ugh, you know?
Yeah, you get to that point. Yeah, you overwork things. Yeah, for sure.
And honey seems to be having a moment right now. There's lots of people doing honey barrels, but not a lot of rye in honey barrels.
With the honey,
so, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, the first time I heard about it was Bell Mead doing their version of it, and how popular that was. And then I know that Nulu does a honey barrel. And then there's a distillery in Virginia in Newport News called Ironclad. They did a honey cask. So like, I saw that and I was like, man, that's really cool, because honey is this really uncontrollable thing where every year that honey is going to taste, if you're tending the same hives, like, what are those bees pollinating? What are they interacting with? And so like, I thought that was a really cool variable where it's the same thing within whiskey production, depending on the crop you might get. Was that a winter rye? Like, you know, when was that planted, or how much rain was there? All of those things that we just have to contend with. I kind of was like, let's throw another variable in there.
And I'm a beekeeper. So like all of my I have the same hives that give me honey every year. It's always different every year. So like you said, it's different based on the season.
And I love something that can evolve, right? And it's like, this was what was available to me at this time. So I want it to be recognizable, but I expect it to evolve.
Doesn't get a whole lot more like small batch like than that, you know?
Right. So Wiggle's very local. You guys you've tried to do a lot of local, like grains locally, sourcing those things. One thing that caught our attention was a grain that you sourced that was corn, that we've had our fair share of different red corn, but we've never had Wapsi red corn. Why?
So
What is Wapsi?
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
So the Wapsi Valley is in Iowa. So it's an heirloom corn grain that was originally grown there. And how I understand it through conversations with the original owners and former members is that was the first bourbon we actually ever produced. So the farmer just said, hey, I've got this. I think it would make a cool whiskey. You guys seem to like to make interesting things. And we were willing to take a chance on it. And so we took that grain and it has a higher protein content, so it's lower yielding. It's not nearly as sweet as a yellow corn bourbon. But what I found within our portfolio is it's actually a very good transition from rye to bourbon, or the other way around, where it has bourbon on the label. This was made with corn, but it has this earthiness and this depth to it that, people are a little bit afraid of, but it's not in an overpowering way, and sort of just bridging that gap to try to convert the bourbon drinkers to fans of ours.
So interesting, because we brought that up when we tried it. We said this is such a transitional type of a drink, as far as flavor goes.
All right. Well, my glass is empty.
Yeah.
What's that other one?
Yeah.
Or something else.
So my next question, before you jump into this, right? So you guys are local, you do local stuff. There's something in your portfolio that is not local to America, Aquavit.
So that's an interesting one. We actually, I think, as far as I can recall, we didn't initially label it as an Aquavit because, as you mentioned, there was sort of just this like unknown about it, where the American consumer is definitely not super familiar with that. Generally speaking, depending on where you are, like the West Coast, I was in Portland at the largest like Aquavit bar, that I've seen. And so
An Aquavit bar,
it was like a Scandinavian bar that just had the largest selection on the West Coast. And
That's
so I was
cool.
like,
That's
really
so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. My brother just went to Norway and had his fair share. So, but anyway, we have Picklesburg here in Pittsburgh. And it's a 3-day, sometimes festival where, it's all about pickles.
That sounds awesome.
I know, right?
And so this product was, I don't want to like misrepresent it. I don't know that that was the impetus for it, but it certainly doesn't hurt the success of that. But it was the spice loading on that Aquavit with the caraway, the dill seed, the dillweed, the garlic, all of that. Those are like pickling spices. And so it definitely represents a pickle flavor, but has a little bit of sugar added to it so that it's a bit more palatable. And we could by all means call it an aquavit, but it is not a traditional aquavit. Like the caraway and stuff, you get that, and I've had in aquavits, but it's unmistakably very pickly.
Yeah.
By design,
Which is very interesting. Very good. We found there's at least one bottle in just about every craft distillery that we've gone to that's in their portfolio that doesn't match the area, but somehow works really well within that area. It's fun to see that aquavit works.
And speaking of like innovation and pushing that product forward, so there was a local hot sauce and pickling company that they would buy barrels from us and they would age their fermented hot sauce in. And so I was like, man, that's really cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So then I said, I think we should age this aquavit in those hot sauce barrels. So we will. And next year we're going to release that. So it's a hot sauce barrel aged pickle aquavit.
Dang.
That
Just
sounds
sounds like
really
it's just
good.
better and better for me. Like
You like
big
the spice.
big spice guy. And I love pickles. So
And it's not overpowering because it has that sugar in it, and the hot sauce they uses jalapenos and serranos, so like it's not like a ghost pepper or habanero where that can be overpowering. So it's definitely more approachable, can make like a nice spicy Bloody Mary, that kind of thing. But really excited to release that next year.
So what are we drinking now?
So this is what we talked about before, where this is that rye aged in a honey barrel and then finished with amberana. So the cinnamon is there, but I felt like I definitely didn't want to age it longer, but I pulled it out at sort of what I deemed to be the optimal time, and it contributed the flavors that I wanted it to. And I think it's just more nuanced. You guys don't have the reference for last year's release, but it's just like an evolution of that honey barrel. So still get sweetness, maybe not as prominent, like the honey doesn't shine through as much, but honey, cinnamon, like rye, it just like plays together really nicely to me. So this is a product that, cool, I got that out of my system, so to speak. And not that I did it with haste, but I'm really excited now to move on to next year and see like what other types of wood finishes I'm going to do with this product and see how it continues to evolve.
Yeah, the honey on this makes it just more sweet. Like you said, it doesn't really have a honey flavor. At least I didn't pick up on that, but
Sweetness.
it does add a sweetness to it. Yeah.
it's like everything you would expect or want out of those flavors, all the way up to the very edge without going over.
Yeah.
So
And
just the right amount.
I appreciate that because it, like I said, I had a lot of reverence for amberana and what it can do. A lot of horror stories that I've heard within the craft distilling scene. It's just like, oh, I came back after the weekend and my product is ruined. And you're like, well, don't want to do that,
So I hear a lot of, at least so far, a lot of ryes for the finishings. Do you stick with ryes, or do you also try to do bourbons?
So we do have, last year with the Brewer Series, we did bourbon in a stout barrel. And so we do have Madeira finishing. That's one of our staple products. And right now, that is one of my large focuses is trying to take that bourbon, put it in those finishing barrels and produce something as successful as I feel that our ryes have been. It's just like, I love rye. And so like when I think about flavors and how they come, I'm like, man, but would it be better with rye? And this barley wine one that we did, the first one you guys tried, I actually tried it with both spirits. I tried it with bourbon and I took that barley wine and mixed it up and tried it with rye. And then as a team, we decided the rye was just the superior product. So that's the direction we went. But that one did not start as like rye. That wasn't my view with that. I wasn't like, oh, it has to be rye. And so we do have bourbon right now in a mezcal barrel that was really, really good. And I'm thinking about just throwing it in another barrel, just, to see what happens. And so like that's something that could be released next year. But yeah, bourbon, it's not at all like I'm neglecting it. It's just like, I get so excited with the different things you can do with rye, especially like I really, really like our rye. And not to say I don't like our bourbon, but like it just has these awesome, awesome flavors. And I just think with sort of, when you're cooking, right, you have a palate that you're just used to, that you're accustomed to, and you kind of work within that. And so I love rye, and it shows through, but it's not like I don't care about bourbon. I have to respect it. And I think we make a great bourbon. Like the Wapsie, but like, wouldn't that be cool to take that Wapsie bourbon and then finish that in something, like, so definitely the wheels are turning and it's on the horizon for sure.
Well, I think for the amount of stuff that you guys are doing, the different things with the flavors and stuff, that bourbon really kind of might be overpowered sometimes. And I think that rye kind of allows the flavors to play out without ever becoming the like center stage.
It's interesting you say that. So, we have a sherry cask rye and a port cask rye, and then we have a Madeira cask bourbon. So all fortified wines from similar region in Europe. And so the Madeira bourbon, I don't let that finish nearly as long as I would those ryes. And to your point, because I feel like it can get overpowered very quickly. And so when I taste that, I want it to be unmistakably our bourbon. And then I want you to like realize that it's an evolved flavor. There's more depth to it than just our standard bourbon, but I want that identity to shine through. So like, to your point, that's something I have to be very sensitive to, where the rye, I have some of these barrels and not by choice that like set in finishing barrels for over 4 years. And then I'm like, man, but it's still rye. Like, it's still unmistakably rye whiskey. And so I don't know that I could do that with bourbon. So just have to be very sensitive to that.
Your last job before you were here was at Copper Fox over in Virginia, which I'm a huge fan of. I am the resident American single malt lover.
Oh, awesome.
Whereas Nick is questionable. Chris has decided he's not a fan.
I'm not a big American single malt guy.
Yeah. But
I can appreciate it.
But yes, and I have not had your American single malt here. I don't know if you have any or not, but if you do, I'll be buying a bottle. But I think it's a little bit more limited for you guys.
Well, for us, we just started that. So that was something that, with the background that I had, I wanted to bring up here. We had made a whiskey that could be passed as an American single malt by definition, but that was not the intention necessarily. And that's that heavy malt whiskey that I spoke about that we finished in maple barrels. That would be defined as a single malt because it's 100% malted barley. But I wanted to create something that, hey, this is going to be aged and released as this within this category. And so, designing a malt profile and an aging sort of system for that. So we just started doing that at the beginning of last year. So it's still in its relative like infancy stage. We're a little bit behind, relative to where the market may be, but I'm really excited, in 2 to 4 years to see how that flavor develops and how that comes along, because through our trials, people were just so stoked about it, but now it has to sit and wait. That's part of it.
I know that came out and really took over a couple of years ago. Do you think that American single malt as a category kind of has staying power? Do you think it's going to be around for a while? Like, should these craft distilleries be making one?
I think it's interesting. I've talked to a number of different people about it. I think that I don't want to speak poorly of any distillery and those who stake their identity on that. I think they're doing great things like Westward. I think they have an amazing product. Westland makes there's some great American single malts. Virginia Distilling Company in Virginia, I'm good friends with those guys. They make an amazing product. So, but they fully committed to that. And I think that it has a place, but at least for here, I don't ever see it outselling our bourbon, outselling our rye. I just don't, but I do see it being more regionally indicative, like kind of how we see rye, but rye doesn't really Maryland rye isn't truly defined. An Empire rye, we know what those are. Indiana style rye, 95.5, we kind of know what those are, but they don't truly have codified identities. But with single malt, I see it. I would hope that it follows a similar path, where a Northeast single malt versus a Southeast single malt versus the West Coast. And we have peat bogs here. I can go get peat. So would a peated single malt here, but it was American peat, would that be cool? And just trying to make it very distinct from Scotch. You have to have reverence for that industry but not trying to emulate that to a T. But I think it could be really cool to have just more regional differences. Not that we don't have those already, but maybe that pioneering that movement where hey, if I go here, I know the style of single malt that I'm getting, just kind of like Scotland has, where Lowland, Highland, Isla, all that stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's definitely is a difference in flavor from your West Coast, westward kind of single malts and your Virginia Distilling Company single malts or Copper Fox single malts.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely is a difference in the palate on them. And yeah, I think that's a good point that regionally you could separate those out and make kind of like a Scotland sort of deal where you have different regions.
That is a very interesting idea. I'm not the single malt guy, but the idea of because we were talking about this a while back. They're trying to pin down what is American single malt, right, and what does that look like and all that. But to allow it to vary from region to region or area to area, that's an interesting concept that I never thought about. I just figured it'd be like kind of we're going to agree it's this one thing and that's what it is and that's what it is.
Right. Which it has been defined now. So there is a definition for it, but that definition is pretty loose.
It's
we
loose.
We absolutely could make it more in that way.
And with malt and the different profiles you can accomplish through different malting practices like floor malt versus drum malt versus, crystal malt and all those different, like that's where I think you're going to see a lot of the innovation is like what percentage of those malts are you going to put in there? Similarly to now the explosion of all these different types of corn and other grains where you see that, I see malting taking a similar path.
Yeah, so quick question for Chris is going to love this question because when we talked about your bottle, the Wapsie bottle on the podcast, we also talked about how you guys are really big within the community, right? So for the Philadelphia Marathon, you guys released a bottle for
the Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh,
Marathon.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So you guys released one for that. You guys partner with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
The Pirates, we have a sponsorship of, so we have 3 bars that have our name on them at the club level. So that's a really cool sponsorship that we have. So that's a cool outlet that I think is nice for the area. So yeah, there are a lot of these sort of like singular opportunities that we look to take advantage of or collab with.
Do you guys think with that sponsorship from the Pirates, do you think you'll do like a grog?
We've definitely thought about how we might optimize that relationship, but it is kind of hard because their food and bev is a little bit separate from like the actual organization, and so like that's who our partnership is with, and sort of when you think about sports and how that's that's a very different drinking style than what we're accustomed to, and so. We just haven't found like the perfect fit for like the format of what we're making that fits in with baseball and that in particular, but definitely continuing to explore that.
Well, Alex, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, inviting us out, and just hanging out here on the floor like this.
Absolutely.
is really, really cool.
It's been a blast.
And so we don't want to take up any more of your time, but is there anything coming out here at Wigle that we should know about?
I think in a couple of weeks we have our holiday drop. So we're going to have an 8-year single barrel wheat whiskey that only 175 bottles, so super limited. This barley wine finished rye whiskey is coming out. That's really exciting. But I think I'm really looking forward to next year where we continue to push the envelope and just see what we can come up with, and definitely excited to have you guys see what we're able to come up with, and because this year I think was a huge big step for us with the sherry and the mezcal and the double cask finish. I want to go into triple and quadruple cask finishes. People look at me like I'm crazy, but like I just really want to push the envelope with flavors there, and so I'm excited to see where that takes us.
Excellent. And we will have all of the links in the show notes and everything for all your socials and your website and all that kind of good stuff. But again, thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you
today.
guys. It's been a lot of fun.
We're big fans.
Yes,
So
we are.
this has been very, very good.
Awesome.
It's been a lot
Thank
of fun.
you guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you want more great content and other perks, be sure to support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. We can be reached on our website, whiskeychaserspod.com, with any ideas for the show. Thanks again.